Greetings, greetings, greetings. Hello, everyone. We hope you are well this day. We hope that you are reaching your highest level of mental, physical, and spiritual capacity. And we are honored that you've decided to spend some time here with our weekly episode of Our Ancestors' Voices, a weekly program sponsored by the All African People's Revolutionary Party. Our topic today is zero empathy for those who plot against us. This U.S. capitalist empire and the entire capitalist world, they have a 500 plus year history of complete denial of our dignity and human rights as exploited, colonized, and oppressed people under this empire. And they don't ever recognize our humanity. And then the minute one of their captains, one of their spokespersons is dead, then we're expected to show empathy towards these people, like this fascist that was shot a couple of weeks ago, even though that fascist and none of them ever show any empathy or respect or integrity in how they talk about our conditions. So we take a page from Frantz Fanon, who taught us that the best way to gain our liberation is to understand that we cannot beat our enemies playing only with the tools they provide us, that we have to provide our own tools. And sometimes we got to take those tools upside their head. So that's what this program is about today. It's clearly not going to be for the weak of heart. So if you're that type of liberal-minded person that you can't deal with truth when it makes you uncomfortable, then you should just log off of this one right now. I'm telling you in advance, trigger warning, because we are not sparing anything for these people, the same way they don't spare anything for us. And we give honor to the indigenous people, of course, of the Western Hemisphere. I'm traveling, doing some work here, and I'm in a small town in Central Valley, California. It's right in the heart of the San Joaquin Valley, where if you consume wine, you've consumed wine produced in the San Joaquin Valley. If you consume fruits and vegetables, no matter where you are on earth, you've consumed fruits and vegetables that were produced right where I am right now. I'm looking at a gorgeous view of great vineyards as well as mountains in the backdrop. And the indigenous people just have beautiful land here. And we stand with them in their quest to gain self-determination and to win their lands back. They belong to them, and they will never truly have their dignity and their ability to determine their own lives until they again have control over their own land and resources. And of course, our African ancestors we honor and give respect to with everything that we do. We dedicated the program last week to our sister Assata Shakur, who made her physical transition in socialist Cuba back on September 25th. And we continue to honor her today and going forward. But we know the best way to honor ancestors like Sister Assata Shakur is to continue their work, to do our best to continue their mission, which was an uncompromising work to liberate our people from this oppressive state. And we start like we always do, just simply by reintroducing ourselves or introducing, if you haven't heard before, or those of you that work for police agencies, making sure you at least are able to know how to properly spell our names for your reports. Our Ancestors' Voices is sponsored by the All African People's Revolutionary Party, the AAPRP. And the AAPRP is a revolutionary, independent, mass, pan-African political party that is based in Africa, based in Africa. So our position is that everywhere African people are, everywhere people of African descent are, our destiny will be determined by what happens in Africa. And if you really study the world, you would know that that's already been the case. It's always been the case. If you look at any aspect of the U.S. civil rights and Black Power movements of the 1960s, they were 100% influenced by what happened in Africa and the African independence movement. And we talked about last week's program about how the Black Panther Party was so inspired by Frantz Fanon, who was a Pan-African revolutionary working in Algeria, so inspired by the land and freedom movement or the so-called Mau Mau movement in Kenya, so inspired by the liberation movements in Azania, South Africa, the Pan-Africanist Congress of Azania, the Azanian People's Organization, the Black Consciousness Movement, the African National Congress. So Africa has always been our guiding light. And for us, as I just mentioned, we will go as Africa goes, no matter where we live on the planet Earth. So when we say Pan-Africanism, that's why we say the true solution to our problems and our suffering is Pan-Africanism, one unified socialist Africa. That's our objective. That's what we're fighting for. That's what our work is aimed to achieve. And we will achieve it. I don't have the slightest doubt in my mind about that. We will achieve it. I believe that, like I believe the sun will come up tomorrow morning. In our work to achieve Pan-Africanism, we outline in great detail, it is outlined rather, in Kwame Nkrumah's Handbook of Revolutionary Warfare, a book he wrote in 1968, which the cover is outlined on the page here. And if you should check out that book, really provides the strategy for us as to how we achieve revolutionary Pan-Africanism, uniting all of the revolutionary Pan-African forces on the ground in Africa who agree with our objective, one unified socialist Africa, or the objective. It's not just ours, it's the objective of African people everywhere on earth. And so that's what we're working for. And this particular program, Our Ancestors' Voices, is hosted each week by myself, Ajamu, and the newly designated Dr. Shakura Umi, my biological and ideological daughter. So to get us started, I will turn it over to the good doctor.
Thank you, Baba Jamu. Appreciate you. Apologies, family. My camera today decided it didn't want to work. So I did get confirmation from Baba Jamu that you all can hear me, but unfortunately you can't see my face today. Okay, so Frantz Fanon's words on African dignity, right? Especially when we start to look at the book on the screen, The Wrenched of the Earth by Frantz Fanon's 60th anniversary edition. And we can even think about how even in the photo of Fanon speaking, there's a banner on the wall that says down with colonialism and imperialism, right? So just learning a little bit more about Frantz Fanon. So Fanon was born in Martinique in the Caribbean. In true Pan-African consciousness, Fanon, a licensed psychiatrist, moved to and became a part of the Algerian Revolution in North Africa. His writings, like the book that I just referenced, also Black Skin, White Mask, and his historic speech at the All African Peoples Conference in Ghana in 1958, articulated his clear vision that African people have the right and responsibility to demand our dignity. According to Fanon, the best way for us to do this is to demand that people respect us. So when we are faced with violence, he articulated that we must answer with better organized violence to defend our dignity and legacy. And I will just also say, this particular topic of the seminar, it means so much to me. All of our topics mean so much to me, but I definitely think that we as a people have been damaged, we've been harmed, we've been traumatized, of course, but I don't think that the solution to deal with that kind of behavior or treatment is to back down. I think that we have no choice. I think we have to rise up. I think we have to stand up. And this is why we always say that being in an organization that is working for justice is so, so, so critical and so, so, so important. And we also say that you don't even have to join our organization. We just ask that you join some organization, make up an organization, create your own. Shop around, find one that you really like and decide if you want to go to a meeting, check it out, get some information at the information session. You never know. And I think that in doing that, we can start to unify. We can start to collectively build on our power. And if we can continue to build on our power, then we're in a better position to prevent and to stop that same behavior that I was referring to earlier, the mistreatment, the dehumanization, the dismissal. We can start to prevent and stop that kind of stuff because the people in power won't be in power anymore. So today's topic is extremely important and useful because I think that some of us need to be reminded that we have a job to do. Some of us have lost sight of that. We have a serious job to do, just like we get up every day. And if you are identified as someone who is working class, you get up and you go do what you have to do every day. This job is, if not more important, equally as important, because this job is about dismantling the same system that is going to continue to oppress you when you get up to do your typical 9 to 5, right? And so this is why it's so important for us to unify and collectively come together. But I would also say, if you came in early, you heard the podcast that we were playing. That's from our Forward Ever podcast, our podcast through the All African People's Revolutionary Party. And they were interviewing Comrade Pierre as well as Comrade Robert, both founders of the Haiti Action Committee. And they were talking about how both comrades, Pierre and Robert, didn't know each other at the time, but they both joined some different initiatives to help release and to fight for Geronimo Pratt's freedom as a Black Panther. And, he was wrongly convicted as a political prisoner. They also were doing some work with the obviously with Haiti, right? But they still hadn't come together. And then they also said that they had done some work with some inequities and political issues here in the U.S. as it related to the U.S. politics. And so that was when they kind of connected, when they both were on the same action as it related to freeing Geronimo. But my point I'm saying to you is they all were in different organizations, but yet they came together and said, we should talk about Haiti more, and we should do something to start the Haiti Action Committee so that people in Haiti can be amplified. We can think about them. We can continue to fight for them, on behalf of those African people, which affects other African people in other parts of the world. And the comrade from the party literally said, it's so cool to see all these organizations coming together. And rightfully so, right? Because we all have a common interest, we all have a common denominator, and we all have a opportunity to learn and to grow and to benefit from us fighting together. And I think the last point I'll make about that is going back to what I said earlier about us as a people, and I'm talking about Africans, but you could easily, substitute that for colonized people or marginalized people, marginalized genders, differently abled people, queer identifying people. Unfortunately, there's a lot of folks that would fit in this descriptive line. But basically, those folks have been harmed in some way, shape, or form. As I said, they've been dehumanized, they've been dismissed, they've been ignored, they've been erased out of time, out of the timeline. They have literally experienced mass genocides and been erased, right? To the point where people don't even talk about the indigenous people anymore. People don't even know what happened to the indigenous people, right? So I think that, of course, with that being one example, we could think of, colonization around the world. We could think of the abduction of African people for the transatlantic slave trade. There's all these different examples. And my point is, those same folks that have been harmed need some self-esteem rebooting. They need some serious self-esteem rebooting, because I think that we have lost sight of who we are, especially nowadays. I've heard people saying, I've talked to different Africans, and they'll say to me, well, we had, Martin Luther King back in the day, but who do we have now? And some people will say, like your petty bourgeois people like Jasmine Crockett and other people like that. But for the most part, I think people know that from a Pan-Africanist lens, we don't have anyone. Well, because I'm an organizer, I know that that's not true, but this is exactly what I'm saying. People need to have a serious reality check. They need to understand that, first of all, they have a responsibility too. They can't just expect somebody else to save the day and to solve all these problems. And second, all these problems are attributing to concepts and terms and things that we still don't understand or know. So if you're looking at the slide and you see the picture and you don't know what imperialism is, that's part of the problem. That is part of the problem. So we can't just expect Fanon to solve all of our problems and to erase imperialism. We should take it upon ourselves to research and educate ourselves on what that term means. What does that system mean as it relates to oppressing people? And we always say that you shouldn't just do that by yourself, you should do that with others. This is why we say you should join some organization that's working for justice. That way you can increase your political education, because we're not going to be able to tackle the problem if we don't understand it. We're not going to be able to tackle the problem if we don't understand all of the ingredients that go into fueling this problem, that go into energizing and electrifying this problem, right? We have to think about that on a larger scale. Next slide, please. And it's up to us to be held accountable for that. I love Fanon saying, like, we have a responsibility and we need to react based off of our dignity and our ability to advocate for ourselves. So, let's talk about why we struggle with dignity and exerting our agency. Why do we struggle with that? Why is that an issue for us? Well, because entire systems of colonialism, slavery, they have covered over spans of centuries, right? Centuries with an S, right? Of convincing European people and Africans that we are inferior as Africans. That has been the consistent message. That has been the consistent propaganda that has come out. And if you don't agree with me, I would just encourage you to think about the next time you are an African person and you have to take a standardized test, the next time you are an African person and you need to show up and let other people know that you are capable of something at your job. If you're going up for a promotion, if you're going up for an increase of pay, then you need to demonstrate that you have certain capabilities. You need to follow protocol. You need to follow some type of process or procedure or application or whatever that looks like. And in doing so, tell me, going through that experience, tell me that throughout the entire experience, especially when you are in comparison to your European counterparts, tell me that you don't feel an ounce of intimidation at all during that entire process. If you're going up for tenure, for example, tell me you don't feel any intimidation the entire time you're getting your letters of recommendation, the entire time you're getting your service and making sure that your students are accounted for, the entire time that you're publishing. Tell me that you don't feel intimidated at all by that experience and by the potential outcome of that experience. This is ingrained in us, you all. I would argue it's biological to some extent. This is ingrained in us. This is what we believe every single day. This is why we have to tell ourselves that we are capable. This is why we have sayings like you have to work twice as hard to get half as much. This is why we understand that this system does not treat us fairly. We understand that because the ingrainment has been processed and manipulated, and I would say even passed through biologically to the child, I would say, so that we believe that we are inferior. And so then we have to constantly push against that. We have to constantly resist that, right? No matter what. And it's done in every aspect of your life, in every aspect of your life, from education, going to school, faith institutions. Those are really big culprits of that, really big culprits of that. And so, because of that, we could think about social services. We could think about social service programs. We could think about interactions that you have with people when you take your child to the playground, when you go to the grocery store to get more food for dinner that night. It happens every day in every aspect of what we do. When you're on the freeway, when you're driving, when you're buying music, when you're downloading something, it happens all the time. It happens. And so as a result, the entire world is presented as centering European culture and history as it's articulated through the distorted capitalist lens. They have already been put on a pedestal because people of color are inferior to Europeans. And because of that, this is why you have some people of color who are petty bourgeois and who want nothing to do with joining an organization that's working for justice, because they're more content with, enhancing their material possessions. In work study yesterday, I was responsible for the World Geo questions, and we are currently reading Positive Criticism, Self-Criticism, a book by Vicky Legion. I love this book. And what's even cooler than that, the entire organization, the entire All African People's Revolutionary Party has been tasked with reading this very same book in any work study, whether it's cadre, pre-cadre, or work study circle. And so, we've been tasked with reading it so that we can continue to be critical on why we incorporate our positive criticism, self-criticism process. And so yesterday with the readings, she consisted of speaking to, or I should say they consisted of speaking to how there is such a thing called possessive individualism under capitalism. And Vicky was talking about how, for the most part, people feel more powerful and they feel more valued because they have obtained the resources to have things that amplify wealth and privilege and success. And Vicky gave the example of saying, my beautiful wife. Like, that is your possession of your partner and the fact that they are beautiful according to you and I guess society. So because of that, you came up as a person if you have what you would define as a beautiful wife, right? As one example. And so this possessive individualism is also ingrained in us. And this is why you have the petty bourgeois Africans, to my point earlier, who are striving so hard to be in that know. They are striving so hard to be as close with the Europeans as possible. They want to keep up with the Joneses and then some. This is why they're doing that. They're going out of their way, you all, to the point where they don't want to relearn their culture if they've been colonized. They don't want to incorporate wearing the traditional clothing. They don't want to consider releasing the propaganda of fixing your hair a certain way, and instead they don't want to have any representation of who they are. This is why you have skin bleaching cream. This is why you have tanning beds. Like, this is why you have these things, right? And so I think that we have our work cut out for us, because even if we decide that we don't want to include these folks because they've made it clear that they want to be a part of a world that has not accepted them yet and won't, but they are convinced that that is the better way to go because white is right, right? That's what we're taught, white is right. That's what we're taught. So if you're not as closely aligned with European white folks, then you're not doing something right. And that's why your life is the way it is, right? That's the teaching, right? That is the teaching, right? So I'm just trying to break this down so we can see how it's all connected. It's super, super important for us to really see how it's all connected. And so just as we continue to think about that, Europe and capitalism are presented as one of the same, and they're really not, right? They have some mutual exclusiveness to them, but yet everyone else is presented as subordinate and even non-human, right? And we don't even have the right to demand respect in their eyes. We don't even have the right to express ourselves. We're not even considered a full person. We're not even considered a full person. There are people who still believe in the 3/5 law today in 2025. We're not even considered full people. And if we're not considered full people, why would we deserve respect? Why would we be able to hold ourselves and be capable? Why would we be able to facilitate ourselves in different ways? Why would we be able to do any of those things? I definitely see it like in all aspects of my life, but my favorite way to see it is when I'm walking my dog, because my dog is very well taken care of. I love her and I do my best to take very good care of her. And I could see that people are sizing me up. They're making all these assumptions, probably that I beat dogs and I put them in fights for a living because that's what they assume Africans do, right? And on top of that, I think they also make assumptions, why is she so well put together? What is she doing where she has her stuff together to be able to take care of a living being? And it's crazy to me because you wouldn't even take the time to note that I am a humanistic person. I love all living beings, and I'm thankful that my dog has chosen to pick me to be a part of her life. But people wouldn't even give me the time to explain that because they've already sized me up based on what they assume me and my people do when it comes to dogs. And don't get me started on the, racial criminalization of dogs. That's another story for another day. But these are just things that I want us to think about, you all. And sometimes we perpetuate it ourselves too. Sometimes we have that institutionalized racism, that personally mediated racism, that internalized racism that we are even perpetuating, right? If you want to talk about colorism, for example, if you want to talk about treating certain people a certain way, because their skin tone is more lighter or more darker, right? And again, like the lighter it is, the more closer you are to being white. And the notion and the data supports that if you look white and if you are close to being white, then you're more likely to be protected. You're more likely to be trusted. You're more likely to be intelligent. You're more likely to be beautiful. You're more likely to be educated. You're more likely to have worked harder. You are more likely to have worked harder. I said that again for the people in the back who are making assumptions about our indigenous cousins who are not working as hard. Okay. So I just want to make sure everybody hears me with that. Okay. You are more likely to be successful. You're more likely to be legit. You're more likely to be honest. White supremacy teaches us that Europeans are more likely to be honest, you all. This is why Africans are criminalized, because we cannot tell the truth. We don't have the capabilities to do that. And remember, we don't have the capability to do that because we're not even a full human. I just want to bring it full scope so we can see all of it connected. Okay. I just want to make sure we all see it. Okay. So, because of that, why would we be able to demand respect in their eyes? Why would we be able to do that? That's the question. And it's a question for us because some of us have made it our life goal to demand respect, but some of us haven't gotten on the train yet, and the train is leaving the station. So the question becomes, what are we willing to do? We always talk about privilege, and we usually say that it's not someone's fault that they have privilege, but the question becomes, but what are you willing to do now that you know you have privilege? What are you willing to sacrifice? What are you willing to lose because of your privilege? That could be me holding a PhD. It could be you if you identify as a straight person. It could be you if you identify as a man. All of us have privilege. But how are we going to use that to advance the struggles of colonized people, marginalized genders, differently abled, queer identifying, anybody who is experiencing mistreatment because of the fact that they are deemed as less than? How are we going to use our privilege to help them? Or how are you going to use your privilege to help us? That becomes the question. And a lot of us, we don't think that we deserve to get respect. And this brings me back to my point originally about how we need a self-esteem boost. And this is also true for many of us, for us to really believe that, first of all, there could be a better world where we don't have to be dehumanized every day. And secondly, how do we fight for that? And what's the connection between freeing Africa and us having this better world? That's going to become the question, which is why political education is so important. I really cannot stress that enough. Ashe.
Ashe, Obrigada, Asante Sana, Madasi, thank you very much. And that is a wonderful segue into what we want to talk about today. Truth is universal today, and yesterday, and tomorrow, it always will be. And we use these two quotes by Sister Sati Shakur, one, and then the other by Kwame Ture. And Sister Asada said, nobody in the world, nobody in history has ever gotten their freedom by appealing to the moral sense of the people who were oppressing them. And then Kwame said, in order for nonviolence to work, your opponent must have a conscience. And then the full quote he made is, America has none. And so these two quotes, even though they were spoken by these two giants in African history, the quotes go together because what they're saying is they're building upon the work that Frantz Fanon gave us in terms of asserting that if we don't have the ability to think for ourselves and develop our own worldview and our own course of action that is independent from the capitalist system, which has been built on our backs and has never allowed us any agency to be full human beings with the opportunity to reach our full potential, we will never be anything more than subjects of the colony or enslaved Africans. That's the most we can achieve until we figure out the importance of developing our own independent analysis, our own perspective of the world, and our own course of action to bring about the type of world that we want to see for ourselves and our future generations. And in the All African People's Revolutionary Party, we have made tremendous strides to develop that African worldview. And we do that through our ideology, which is Nkrumahism, Tureism, Cabralism. It takes uh, its concepts from the thinking and writing of Kwame Nkrumah, Sekou Touré, and Amilcar Cabral. And it is the revolutionary African personality that speaks to the world through an African lens, a revolutionary Pan-African lens, and gives us that independent analysis of the world that prioritizes our dignity and permits us to practice seeing things in a way that serves the interests of humanity and isn't just, within the paradigm of the capitalist system, right? So this is important because one of the most important things that the African independence movements and Black Power movements attempted to do is help us learn to assert our agency. If you think about those of you that probably know a little more about U.S. history, but even if you don't know much beyond that, the independence movements in Africa were all about us as African people asserting our agency. And even though groups, the liberation movements in Africa, each and every one of them, that was fighting European colonialism, from the African Party for Independence of Guinea-Bissau, the PAIGC in Guinea-Bissau, to the Democratic Party of Guinea in Guinea, to the Convention People's Party in Ghana, to the Land and Freedom Movement, the Mau Mau in Kenya, the Kenyan African National Union in Kenya, to, we mentioned the African National Congress, the Pan-Africanist Congress, the Azanian People's Organization, the Black Conscious Movement, all of the liberation movements in Azania, South Africa, right? Every liberation movement that we had on the continent, it was always framed, of course, the ruling class writes the history. So every liberation movement that we had, they were always framed as terrorists. They were always framed as people who were violent towards the colonial class, and that were people that did not have the level of humanity as the European colonists who were oppressing us. At the independence of the Congo in July of 1960, in what the town called Leopoldville, the then King of Belgium got up and praised Leopold, who had been previously held that seat some 40 years before that, and was responsible for facilitating the deaths of about 20 million Africans in the Congo, as well as just causing amputations for several millions more in Belgium's brutal effort to intimidate the African masses in the Congo in order to control what was then the mad rush for ivory, which was coming out of the Congo. So this is the history, right? And in that speech that this terrorist gave at the Congolese independence, he basically told the Congolese people that they owed their civilization to the Belgians. And this goes to what Shakur said, like this is truly the values that this capitalist system is built on. And then if we move over to this society, it's the same thing. It's the same principle that, look at what's happening today in this Western society, in this backward United States of America. The very indigenous people who come from places throughout the Americas that are, their history, their people, their culture is indigenous to the Americas, whether they're in what's today known as Mexico or El Salvador or Guatemala, right, or Honduras, or any of those countries in South America or the Caribbean, Puerto Rico, that they are talked about like they don't have a right to be here and these are their lands. Like this has been normalized to the extent that you see even indigenous people parroting that nonsense, and it's so stupid. Like they colonized Puerto Rico, made Puerto Rico a what they call a protectorate. It's a colony. That's what a protectorate is a colony. It's a colony. And so everybody in Puerto Rico has citizenship in the US. And no, they cannot vote in the US presidential elections. I mean, If I was them, I wouldn't want to. But they do get to vote in other types of elections if they choose to do so. Again, I don't know why that would should be their focus. Their focus should continue to be liberating Puerto Rico. But my point is that this entertainer that was announced would be performing at the the U.S. football Super Bowl, Bad Bunny, from Puerto Rico. Like these people were like, well, we need U.S. citizens. Why is he doing it? He's not even a U.S. And like people in Puerto Rico are U.S. citizens. I mean, that's how stupid it all is. And not only that, they've had plenty of people born in other. The Rolling Stones performed at the Super Bowl, and they weren't even born on this continent. They came out of Britain. So this is the insanity that if you don't take an active effort to ensure that you have a healthy perspective that's independent of the system that's oppressing you, you yourself will believe these types of things. And we see that all you have to do is get on social media and you see that all everywhere. There are a lot of Africans, for example, and indigenous people and Asian people who are on social media and just simply parroting the talking points of the capitalist system. There's one coon who I guess he was an ex-cop. It doesn't surprise me. And he's on there all the time with, Make America MAGA hats on and, always critical of our people in ways that aren't even logical. But I mean, this is, on the one side of it, it's these people are doing this because it is a pathway for them to gain clout and to have the potential to monetize their backward ideas because there are plenty of Europeans who want to hear African denigrate African people. They want to hear an indigenous person denigrate indigenous people. There are plenty of Europeans that want to do that and will pay to do that. So that's what it is. But we're not concerned about that. And, there have always been, Malcolm X told us, there's always been house slaves and field slaves. That's not a new thing. So those of us that know our history and understand class struggle, we know that there's always going to be some petty bourgeoisie Negroes, wannabe petty bourgeoisie Negroes, who are going to do everything they can to sell our people out because they think they can have personal individualistic benefit from doing that. So we're not concerned about that, but we do want to make the point again that unless we develop our own independent approach to understanding who we are and understanding what we need to do to carve out our own pathway, we'll forever be subjected to all of that nonsense, right? So it's important to do that because there's a counterinsurgency attack being waged against us. And I talked about Leopold, who's in the center picture. And look at these people. Look at this guy that was just killed, this Kirk clown who was killed a couple of weeks ago, and then that ugly ass ostrich looking white demon who called the autistic 5-year-old boy the N-word, and to show you how barbaric so many people are in this backward ass society. She was awarded $800,000 in donations from the most criminally minded elements in the history of human society who basically awarded her for her efforts to dehumanize a developmentally challenged young boy, because she's just a demon. She's just the devil. These kind of people, I've never believed the Nation of Islam theology that the white man is the devil. But when you have people like these kind of people on the screen right humanize some of these people. They don't deserve it. So this is what we're dealing with. And of course, as always, whenever I say something, my internet is unstable. I know I'm out here in the middle of nowhere, but it's funny how that always happens. So hopefully you all can still hear me. But, these are the contradictions that we're facing, right? And it's because, this system has spent the last several decades advancing this question that all forms of resistance to oppression that we wage are wrong. Like I said, no matter what the approach is, it doesn't matter. It's not about, well, quiet, nonviolent uh, civil disobedience would be okay. The problem is when people, what they call riot. That's a bunch of bullshit. And we know that because we know our history. In 1919, in this backward ass country, after the constant string of lynchings, there were thousands of Africans lynched for nothing in this country. There were thousands of Africans who responded by that in a number of cities in this country by having what they call quiet marches, where thousands of people would march on the streets. They would wear all white, symbolizing white supposedly symbolizing a color of peace. That's some colonial bullshit. But that's what people did. That's what people's understanding was then. And nobody would say a word. And the point of those marches was to try to convey that we are no threat to you. We just simply want to exist in this society as peaceful and productive human beings. And those marches did absolutely nothing to convince these people that we were people that they should support, not being viciously and brutally assaulted and oppressed. It did nothing to do that. So it's not about that. It's not about that at all. You know, that's 100 years ago, but you can only go back a few years. And when Colin Kaepernick, the football player, was peacefully bowing down, I mean, these people wanted to castigate him. Even that nitwit basticle that's in the White House right now. He, said that he should be pulled off the field and beaten. That's exactly what he said. So it doesn't matter what we do. Nothing will ever be acceptable to these people. So that's why it doesn't make any sense for us to continue to try to fit within their paradigm. We're never going to be able to do that. The only thing that makes sense is for us to develop a paradigm that serves our interests. That's what we have to do. Right. And when I say us, I'm talking about all colonized and oppressed people. Right. So they're never going to accept and respect our ability to protest the system's oppression of us because they identify 100% with the system. And so in order for them, if they ever accepted what the system does to that, that would have to mean that they are accepting that they are on the wrong side of history. And they're not going to do that. Right. So this dead fascist, like the response is that they expect us to have concern for him and his family. I have as much concern for his wife as she has for me, period. Dot. And I sleep well with that understanding. And you should try it. It'll release stress in your life. I mean, it's stressful to try to fit into these people's backward paradigm that you're never going to fit in. And I gave up on that years ago. Like, I don't care. You dehumanize me, I'm going to dehumanize you. And that works just fine for me. You should try it. You'll feel a lot better. But the response to this is that because they see us as non-humans and that we don't have any agency, which means we don't have the right to advocate on our own behalf, because the capitalist system keeps us so dehumanized. So that means that they can constantly castigate our people. Those of you that can think back just 20 years, right? Like, remember Khalid Abdul Muhammad, the former national representative for the Nation of Islam, who eventually left the Nation of Islam and formed the new Black Panther Party. Remember Brother Dr. Khalid Muhammad? And Dr. Khalid Muhammad had a scathing rebuke for white America. He didn't, he used to say, I didn't come here to play pin the tail on the donkey. I came here to pin the blame on the honky. He didn't spare anything in talking about Europeans. He came out of the Nation of Islam. His philosophy, he went on Sean Hannity and said the white man is the devil. He didn't bow, he didn't scratch when nothing was itching. He just didn't do that. And this entire country castigated him for his views. This man, he didn't hurt a single person. He didn't hurt a single European. He didn't go after anybody. He was never arrested and charged with any crime against Europeans. Not one. But the U.S. Senate voted in 1994 after Khalid gave a speech at Keene College in New Jersey. KEAN, look it up. The U.S. Congress, the Senate, voted 95 to nothing to censor Khalid Muhammad because of his words. It is the first and the only time up to date that the U.S. Congress has voted to censor a private citizen that wasn't a politician, didn't hold elected office, any of that. So don't give us this bullshit that all he did, all Charlie Kirk did was talk. As long as he talked about things that supported the capitalist system, you devils were fine with that. But the minute that we talk about defending ourselves against the capitalist system, then we get voted out by the Congress. Whether it's Khalid Muhammad, whether it's Malcolm X, whether it was Marcus Garvey, Kwame Ture. I saw it so many times with Kwame Ture. Whether it's Assata Shakur, it doesn't matter who it is, we get castigated. A number of us have been in prison and even killed for speaking out against this system. That's all Fred Hampton did in Chicago was speak out. He didn't harm a single European. He didn't commit one act of violence against anybody. And the state assassinated that African because of what he said about how oppressive this state was against not only African people, but all of oppressed humanity. So don't give us that shit about, well, all Charlie Kirk was doing was talking. He was doing a whole lot more than talking. And these white people, you're so sick in the goddamn head. He was our Martin Luther King. Martin Luther King was killed because he raised contradictions about the oppressive nature of the capitalist system. And he did that because he wanted to raise up the conditions of the millions of oppressed people around the world. When he came out against the Vietnam War, that's why he did that, to raise conditions about the oppressed people around the world. This dead cracker fascist here, all he did was talk about things that weren't even true. African people commit 51% of the crime. I mean, I'm not even going to deconstruct that. We've done it in other programs. So you do your own research. But if you believe that today, on October 5th, 2025, you're the dumbest asshole in the history of human civilization. And you apparently can't read, because anyone who spent 5 minutes doing any quality research would know that that's a bunch of nonsense. And this dead clown, spent his whole time building that up with people. And when you build up something like that and you have that kind of following, you are creating conditions that make life unsafe for our people. And you can't tell me that that asshole didn't know what he was doing when he did that. There's no way in hell you could tell me that. I'm not going to ever accept that. And if you're dumb enough to accept it, that's your problem. I know exactly that this man knew exactly what he was doing, because when he started Turning Point USA, he was making less than $30,000 a year, US dollars. That's a fact. Look it up yourself. And by talking about us like that, by calling indigenous people animals and rapists and all this, he was able to turn himself into a multimillionaire, because, again, racism has always been and always will be profitable in this country. There are plenty of sick, mediocre Europeans who have ridden the crest falls of affirmative action to get in the positions they are, the epitome of white privilege, who know that any effort to expose that is going to impact their ability to continue to be benefit and reap such benefits. So they will always promote racism because, like Lyndon Johnson said, this is how you keep the white man under tow, is just keep telling him he's better than the Negro. So don't expect me to shed any tears for this dead cracker fascist who created a list of professors, African professors, who were teaching truth on college and university campuses. And he created a hit list against these people. And the sister that teaches at one of the universities was talking about, she was showing that she had received 300 death threats in a period of a month or two, something of that nature, where these people said they would come and uh, uh, perform heinous sexual assault against her. And you talking about all this cracker did was just talk. I mean, you got to be out of your goddamn mind. We're not listening. You don't have any credibility to us. None of these people have any credibility to us whatsoever. And meanwhile, we have so much work to do because so many of our people are digesting this Kool-Aid. They parrot the same line that these crackers parrot. And we don't have any agency, any dignity. Everything's about making money any way we can make money. And we'll sell out our whole population to make a few dollars, to sit up under these white people and pretend that we're doing something to advance man. And you know damn well that that's not true. You know, damn, there's not an African alive that you convince me truly believes that we uh, commit 50% of the crime in this country. I know that these Africans parroting that know that's not true, but it's a profitable line for them to use it. These white people saying it, no, it's not true. You know, these people ain't stupid. That white boy wasn't stupid. He knows that that's not true, but he was doing that because it was profitable for him to do that. And that's always been the American way. I mean, these people used to eat us. A lot of them probably still do. You know, so this is the history. This is who you're dealing with when you deal with that. And I'm not saying that they're not human, but they certainly need to behave a lot better if they want us to credit them with humanity. You know, we're not just going to offer that out. And they should understand that because they don't believe in any affirmative action. They have to earn that humanity. And right now, they're not doing it. They're simply not doing it. So the last part of this that we want to talk about is what is a healthy dignity for us? How do we maintain a healthy dignity, right? The way we do that is we have to decide what side we're going to be on. You know, that song, you know, I can't remember how it goes, but it's something like, what side are you on? Like, we have to sing that song and make a decision, right? Like, you know, these coons on social media, like this Myron Gaines guy, you know, again, monetization makes a lot of money talking bad about African people, especially African women. If you want to make money on social media, develop a platform denigrating African women. Effective formula, you know, and those of us who study it, we know that. So we have to make the decision that we're not going to listen to people like this person and we're going to call them out. And I see a lot of people starting to do that, which is good. They're starting to call out these coons, and that's good. So we need to continue to do that. And then instead of these people, we have to uplift people who deserve respect, like our sister Asata Shakur. We have to uplift people like that. Now, this is easy for me because this is who I grew up listening to. I grew up listening to the Asada Shakurs, the Kwame Tures, the Huey P. Newtons, the Kathleen Cleavers, the Kwame Nkrumahs, the Secretaries, the Teodoro Gomez's. These are the people I grew up listening to, the Fidel Castros, the Che Guevara, the Malcolm X's. These are the people that I grew up with. And I recognize that today, those of you growing up now, you don't have anyone like that. You know, these Myron Gaines, these people, that's what you have. What's the other one? Carlton White or Charlton, whatever the coon's name. These are the only people you have available to you. So you think that that's, you know, giving you some sort of analysis. And these celebrities, that's what you have. You don't have people, it's not that they don't exist. Like Shakur said, we have organizers today that are as good as anyone we've ever had. The only thing that's changed is that the capitalist system recognizes they're not going to give us platforms like they did in the 60s and 70s. They're not going to put us on there and let us talk about our beliefs. They're not going to do that at all. That's why the people that you see speaking for us are people that don't really know much about what they're talking about. They don't know, you know, they'll say things. They mean, a lot of them mean well. Not all of them, I'm not saying they're all sellouts. Some of them really mean well. I listen to Urban View Radio on Sirius XM, and the talk, it's a talk, it's African talk all day. And a lot of them mean well. I think that they're people who are genuinely concerned about the conditions of our people, but they don't have the foundation. You know, when they talk about things, they don't know how to talk about it. They talk about what we need to do, and they'll say things on there like, well, we can't leave America. So we have to do what we can to make America what it's said it was going to be. You know, that's like saying you're trapped in the house with a rapist. I can't leave the rapist. I can't get out of the house. He's barred all the doors. So I just need to try to make the rapist a better human being. Like that, you're never gonna. It's better to blow the whole house up. you're never going to be able to transform that person. You're not dealing with that person from a position of dignity and strength. You're dealing with that person from a position where you're the oppressed and they're the oppressor. You're never going to have any leverage when that's the reality. And that's the same thing with us in this capitalist society. So any healthy relationship requires mutual respect. You can't disparage us as African people on every level in order to appeal to racist sentiments that allow you to make the kind of millions that fascists made, and then tell us we need to respect you when you die. The hell with you. Burn in hell. That's burn in hell. And whoever's gonna and stop being so damn afraid, and I mean they're gonna come after you. If you come after me, I don't get you've been coming after us. I don't give a damn. You came after Fred Hampton, you came after Huey P. Newton, you came after Angela Davis and Asada Shakur, you came after Kwame Ture. I was with him when you came after him. You think I give a damn about you? Come on, do whatever the hell you gotta do, because we're certainly gonna do whatever the hell we need to do. We are not afraid of you people because we have dignity. We have dignity. What's the worst you can do? Make it so I can't have a job? You think that's going to stop me? You got to be out of your goddamn, you know? So we owe that cracker and all the crackers and graham crackers like him the same level of respect that they give us. Absolutely zero. And we want to thank you for joining us today. Next Sunday is October 12th, Indigenous Peoples Day. And please join us and spread the word. Our program that day is going to be We Have Zero Chill on supporting Indigenous peoples' lands. And we've done programs like this around this time of year before, but this one's going to be different. Our focus next week is going to be specifically on calling out these colonially centered minded Europeans who don't want to deal with the question of this being indigenous people's lands, and these confused Africans who know nothing about Africa and have accepted the colonizer vision of Africa and therefore want to pretend that they've been in the Americas forever. That's who our target is going to be next week. So join us for that. Go to the red and white QR code upper left and find out about all of the AAPRP programs. Go to the Forward Ever shop and support the Forward Ever shop. And by doing that, you support the work of the All African People's Revolutionary Party. So we appreciate you doing that. Go to hoodcommunist.org. You can find that through that QR code by scanning it. That's the Revolutionary Pan-African blog. Needs your support. You get a lot of educational materials there. So go ahead and do that. My self-defense class is every Thursday night from 6 to 8. I have people there reading Hood Communists on a regular basis that come to the self-defense classes. So if you're in the Sacramento area, you're welcome to come. 2775 Cottage Way, like cottage cheese, Unit 15 in Sacramento. Come on through. We are exercising our minds and our bodies, teaching people self-defense, and also teaching people the best defense, which is developing our minds and developing this this independent political perspective that'll allow us to think for ourselves. So join PRP. Go to the website at www.aaprp-intl.org, aaprpinternational.org, and watch the video and learn how to become a member of the All African People's Revolutionary Party. We would love for you, if you're African, to do that. And the bottom QR code on the right, the black and white one, support Burkina Books. It's also Niger Books. This is the work of the All African People's Revolutionary Party on the ground in the Sahel region in Africa. And the work is to bring revolutionary literature in there to those countries. And if you know anything about colonialism, you can get plenty of Huck Finn books in Africa, but it's very difficult to get Kwame Nkrumah books, even in Ghana. It's very difficult to get Sekou Touré books, even in Guinea. It's very difficult to get Thomas Sankara books, even in Burkina Faso. So become a monthly sponsor to this program through the black and white QR code. Pay what you can and help us do that work. And please support my book. If you bought it, buy some more and give them away, and develop book clubs. Contact your local library, ask them to put it in there. A Guide for Organizing Defense Against White Supremacist, Patriarchal, and Fascist Violence, A Guide for Organizing Defense Against White Supremacist, Patriarchal, and Fascist Violence. Unfortunately, you can only buy it through Amazon. Please don't get hung up on that. We're using their tools for liberation. The book is all over the world. It's sold thousands of copies. 100% of the proceeds go towards anti-fascist work that I'm involved in. Gasoline I need to go to the anti-fascist work. Supplies for the self-defense class, which I buy pretty much every week. So make sure that you develop a way to buy this book. This book is not going to be on Oprah Winfrey's book list or Reese Witherspoon's book list. It's not going to make it there. So the only way people are going to know about it is if you help me spread the word. And by doing that, you help people get a better understanding of organizing work, and you also help us do this anti-fascist work. And I don't just do this anti-fascist work in California, I do it all over the world. So thank you for joining us today. Forward ever, backwards never. Enjoy the rest of your day.